We've used some SQL extracts from Infinite Campus to populate some systems that weren't SIF compliant. We don't use those systems anymore, but I can talk about that and can explain our experiences with those. And that system did work, and it was a great piece. So that is definitely an option as well. We're using the free tools from Google, so we got Google Active Directory Sync, and then Google Gaps, whatever the A is, password sync, Google something password sync. We have that running as well. So lots of different tools that we're using to keep, in an attempt to keep everything in sync. 99% of the time all is well. Sometimes it needs a good swift kick. Sometimes it needs a few cuss words or a slap alongside the face, just like the IT director. So we've been very happy and we've been very successful. So we're happy with how we've gone about that. So again, we've talked about the three different ways that we're moving it. We use SIF whenever possible. So SIF stands for the School Interoperability Framework. It's a standard for moving data in and out of school systems. So there's a board that decides on what data elements can move back and forth. Any vendor that writes to the SIF spec has to follow spec. It has to pass all their internal and external testing. There's only one way you can be SIF compliant. So if it can do SIF, it's a standard, and you know that it's worked and has been tested. So there's some issues that we've had with SIF, and it really kind of depends on the vendor options. So we've had 2 information systems since we've started this. So it started with SASE XP from way back a long time ago. We had a SIF agent for SASE that was super flexible. So there was some scripts in place. We could tweak all of our fields we were using, and it was super convenient. So we could actually pull in some things, do some custom fields, take some custom programming in there and out of there. It worked well. When we moved to Infinite Campus, we lost all of that flexibility because Infinite Campus didn't write any of that flexibility into their agent. So what we were kind of doing with SASE, we lost that ability to do when we moved to Infinite Campus. Was it a deal breaker? No. We felt it was important to have those data move back and forth in real time. And SIF is pretty close to real time. By the time I hit save on entering an enrollment record in Infinite Campus, it's already out to Active Directory. Transportation already has their basic information so they can plunk them on a bus. They're already enrolled in the library system, and those are the 3 systems that we use with SIF today. So when a parent walks in and enrolls their student, hey, I take their name and I plunk them all into Infinite Campus, and the parent would say, hey, I need some busing as well. So then we dial up transportation, and by the time I hit save, by the time I dial transportation's phone number and hand that phone to the parent, transportation already has all of their basic demographic data in their transportation system. They verify a few different pieces of information, plunk them on a bus, and then that's done. So there's it's a pretty close to a real-time system with SIF. So that's the cool thing about SIF. Again, we use the Google Active Directory Sync and the Google Apps Password Sync. So that takes care of all of our Google things. Clever can do that as well. I haven't ever investigated using Clever for Google Apps, but I know that's one of their options. We've used in the past scheduled SQL exports and imports when SIF agents aren't available. This is our first year using Infinite Campus Food Service. So we were a school dining system or whatever that was renamed after they changed to Total K-12, however that worked. But we were a school dining system food service vendor or user up until this year. So there was no SIF agent available, but we had a SQL export that we ran twice a day coming out of Infinite Campus to suck all of our student data, parent data, and then family ID associations with that. So we had it built that basic family structure, and then we had a family ID that we could associate with that. And then there was also an override field. So you had your split families that mom said, by God, dad can't put any money in or see any of these other kids. So we had another custom field that we could do an override for any of these automated process to go along with that. So that's how we did this SQL extract. That ran twice a day, and then the import side sucked that into school dining system on an automated process and just dumped it right in. At the end of the day, we did kind of the exact opposite. So we took a SQL dump out of school dining system then that contained family balances or lunch balances. It contained free and reduced lunch status, and because all that stuff was calculated in the school dining system. So then we had a reverse export then that dumped out of school dining system, and then Infinite Campus sucked that data in and then populated all the necessary fields in Infinite Campus. So there wasn't two people dealing with free and reduced lunch status or where that was at in two different systems. Food service took care of that. We automated that import process back in this Infinite Campus. So that's kind of how that process worked for us. And that worked great. We had it actually populating in message inbox message for Infinite Campus. So as a parent would log into the parent portal, it would show their lunch or their lunch accounts. You know, your lunch account has such and such amount of dollars in it. If you need to add money, there was a link right there that just took them right into a school dining system. It was slick. There was still different sign-ons and different accounts, and we're happy that we've moved to a fully integrated system, but that was our workaround to make it a nice, smooth process and reduce some double data entry. So our SIF journey, we started in the summer of 2006, so we're almost 10 years into this. Again, SASE XP, we've since moved to Infinite Campus. We tied that to Active Directory, our library system, which was Winnebago at the time. We did have Spectrum. We moved to InfoCenter, and now we're at the Library Corporation's something. I forget what that piece of software is called, but it's all been SIF. We haven't had to do any other programming, just point the right agent at Infinite Campus, and it just does what it needs to do. So we've been through 3 library systems through this process, and then transportation is VersaTrans. That's been a constant for us as well. So, again, I've talked about the systems that we swapped out. I was worried about our SASE XP to Infinite Campus transition. Infinite Campus builds in their own agent, and they have their own zone integration server built right into Infinite Campus. We were pretty invested and really liked what we had with EduStructures / Pearson / Kimono now, 3 different companies along the way in this process that provide our Active Directory agent, and we had their zone integration server piece. So we tried to stay with that, and we just kind of ran into problems. We shouldn't have. I mean, it's a standard. It should have worked fine. But we had this issue with Infinite Campus sending to another zone integration server and then back out to all of our systems. Once we removed that third-party zone integration server, we had a lot fewer issues in our data interchange. So with Infinite Campus, that's no additional piece of software that you have to buy or pay for configuration. That's included in your yearly licensing fee. When we had to make the decision whether or not we were going to go to PowerSchool or Infinite Campus, PowerSchool at that time was bundling your SIF agent and your zone integration server. I can't speak to if they're continuing to do that, but that would be something you'll have to check out along the way. Our Active Directory agent is an additional yearly fee that we pay for support on that, so there are some additional costs that go along with that. The library system, that agent was included in our purchase, and we pay a $500 fee for the VersaTrans piece for SIF agent for them. But so you just need to make sure that you have the correct agents or the agents for your software to support that for SIF. I've talked about our SQL imports and exports, and that did work well for us. Like I said, we've moved away from that. I know that there's all kinds of people doing SQL imports and exports to all kinds of different systems. I sat on a conference call with a school district in Missouri that was doing VersaTrans with Infinite Campus, and they wanted to do SIF, or they were currently doing SQL exports, and they wanted to do SIF for the real-time piece, but they were doing so many custom pieces with their SQL export that when we talked about the limitations of moving to SIF, they kind of got scared and then backed out a little bit. So I don't know where they ended up going, but they were doing enough SQL custom things with Infinite Campus and dumping that into VersaTrans that it just, SIF wasn't going to allow them the flexibility that they needed. So the basic process when you're using SIF, you need to find that keeper of all information. So pick that one piece of software that is your holy grail of data. For us, that's Infinite Campus. That's where we house everything. You need to have that piece of software that's going to populate everything else. That one thing that you maintain correctly to populate everything else. So that's always been our student information system. We usually only use SIF and our data interchange pieces for student directories, student information. So you can move staff data with SIF if you'd like, but our business office does a better job of maintaining our staff data in the business side of software, and they don't have They don't have a SIF agent for that, and there's no way to write that to dump into campus, to populate SIF, to go back. And so we've kind of done our staff accounts manually. There's not a lot of those, so that's, you know, it's not like we're creating 300 staff every year, but that's just a choice that we've made. You can do that if you wanted to put all of your staff in Infinite Campus, which we're pretty close to doing now that we have Shout Point, you know, and deal with all of our messaging and text messaging and those kinds of things. We can probably do staff, but we just haven't done that yet. So all data is added or changed in the student information system itself. So if you know, students get adopted and have last name changes or their graduation year changes or anything like that, everything is taken care of in Infinite Campus. We don't make any adjustments in Active Directory, in Google. We don't touch any other system. It's done in Infinite Campus, and then all those changes flow out from there. Again, it's near real time, so I'm not going to say it's real time, but in 30 seconds, by the time I've dialed them up and handed them the phone, they've got the data, it's there, it's ready to go. And they do some troubleshooting or some looking at that data and say, yep, the address is in the correct format, we got everything we need, we're good to go. So they do get to approve or disapprove those messages or make any changes along the way, and I'll show you how that looks. When we started with this process, we used to have registrations scattered all over the district. We used to do it, we had 3 nights where everybody came to one building and it was all done in that kind of process. We've since went to a central registrar. So any new student, re-enrolled student, anybody new that's coming back to Fort Dodge comes to our central administration office. We have a registrar, that's what she does, that is her job responsibility. She enrolls those kids, makes sure that they're all right in the system, she knows how to do the data entry, and then that populates everything else from there. We don't allow secretaries to even do address changes, phone number changes, nothing. All that happens through our central registrar. So our current systems that we are using right now, Infinite Campus, and that's our student information system. We have their SIF agent and their zone integration server. The zone integration server, again, is that piece that ties all the agents together and then disseminates where all those changes need to go. So that is a key piece in your SIF infrastructure. You have to have a zone integration server. I know that there's some AEAs out there that are providing zone integration servers as a service, so you don't need to run your own. If you have an AEA that's doing that, that's definitely an option. With PowerSchool, they were bundling the Kimono, EduStructures, Pearson version, and I don't know where they sit in that process. So, but you need a zone integration server to do SIF. We get our Active Directory agent from Kimono. They have all kinds of other agents as well. They do a Google Apps for Education. They do an Office 365 agent for those kinds of things. So Kimono has been around as long as we've been doing this. They've just been renamed along the way. It started out with EduStructures. That was the original company that we started dealing with in 2006. And several of the guys that we worked with then are still there in quality control. You know, they just kind of moved up the ladder and have made it through that Pearson transition. But those guys have done all kinds of things with SIF along the way, and we're happy to partner with them. And we've had some issues. They've had some agent issues and bugs that we've had to work through, and they've always been great to deal with that. So it's worked well for us. Our Versatrans SIF agent comes directly from Versatrans. When we purchased it originally, we did purchase that through EduStructures, but Versatrans always provided the support. Our bill always went to them. I don't know how EduStructures ended up, how they got in the mix, but it was always done through them until recently. So we deal with them. We deal with Versatrans directly on their SIF agent. So it's worked well. They have their own support team, and when we need their help, we get it, and they do a fine job. Our Google Apps for Education, we're not doing that with SIF. There are some SIF options you can do with that. Again, you can use Clever as another piece of software we'll talk about in a little while. But we're just using the free tools that Google provides. We've got them configured close enough to where they're working for us. We're not doing anything super crazy or anything, but they are populating systems on a scheduled process that you can schedule however many times you run it. We run it once a day, and the password sync is a real-time change. So anytime you update your Active Directory password, it's pretty close to near real-time to flow up to Google for the password pieces. The Active Directory sync, though, is not a real-time process. That's a scheduled task you have to run. kind of to the basics or the demo pieces of stuff that we need to show. Any questions that I can answer, any comments or concerns about things along the way? Anybody else doing anything like this and using something else? All right, well, there's other people, there's other agents out there for Active Directory. We were an EduStructures customer for as long as, well, since we started. Tim Bunce at Jefferson is doing Active Directory through, I can't even remember what, it's a company out of Illinois that's doing their lockdown on their Windows machine, but I can't remember what it's called. But he has another Active Directory agent that does his Active Directory piece, and it ties into that piece of management software. So there's all kinds of options out there. SIF is, yeah, it's kind of a quiet thing, but it's been around a long time, and it's definitely something to consider. So I'm going to sit down and try and do some of these demos for you. If you have any questions, just yell it out, and we'll go from there. So I didn't get our contacts in there. You can go to the SIF Association website to check all of your different pieces of software, see what's out there. There's all kinds of food service vendors. School Dining System is not one of them, but if you have a NutriKids, they have one. There's a Follett agent that Kimono supports, so there's all kinds of library pieces and all kinds of things out there. Atrium is another library software that's pretty popular here in Iowa, and Tim's running that SIF agent with their piece of software, and it works fine. So that's that. I think I'm done with my slide deck, so let me get out. And I apologize for my VPN is not functioning. So I'm remoted in to remote in to remote into another server. So you'll just kind of have to bear with the lag. I'm going to get out of this, log into campus. If I can remember my campus login. And if we have internet. Okay, so everything for SIF is down in System Administration inside Infinite Campus, and then there's data interchange. So here's my agents that we currently have. So you go in and define your agents, and you set these up. So here's our directory agent that we have. IP information that you do, is it registered, is it sleeping, is it all that kinds of stuff, and then where does it push the data to? So that's your basic setup for an Active Directory agent. If you're involved in the Iowa tier piece, that's all data is exchanged back and forth with SIF there as well. So that's just another agent that they provide. They are getting closer and closer to doing certified enrollment and those kinds of things through SIF. Some people are doing that. We're not lucky enough to be cool like that, so we're still doing the old file import-export pieces. But it will be nice once we get to that point. But they're getting closer. It's just not there yet. TLC is our library agent. Again, it's just all same basic information for setup, and then our Versatrans piece. Once you have your agents set up, then you have to go in and tell them what those agents have actual access to. So you go in, and then there's this sea of checkboxes for what you can do. So you add your SIF object. There's all kinds of SIF objects that are published and provided by the Student Information System, and then different pieces of software look at those objects to be sucked into their piece of software. So you pick your objects, and then you tell what kind of access you have, and then do you allow the agent to write back to Infinite Campus, or don't you allow it to write back to Infinite Campus? We aren't writing any data back into Infinite Campus from any of our other systems. The only piece that we really kind of considered that with is our transportation system. But Infinite Campus only has 1 or 2 bus routes, sections, so there's not, every student that rides a bus actually rides 2 buses for ours. They ride from wherever they're picked up to a central transfer point and then get on another bus to go to their school. So there's not enough fields in Infinite Campus to publish all that data back into. So that would be kind of handy, but that's where the limitation of you can't write any custom scripts or do any custom data information with SIF. So that's a problem. And that's why we don't write back in. So that's your sea of checkboxes. I'm trying to think. One of these is, there's a lot more as you get going here, here's what you have to be able to provide all these, so then this list gets really long to kind of keep in touch with and keep track of. So, but once you get it set, it's kind of one of those things that once you get it set up correctly, and you know when it's not set up correctly, but once it's right, you're never back in here to touch this again. So you have to set up all your different zones. So we have a state zone, again, to publish to tier. So that's what different zones are set up for. And, oh, this is our state zone. We were trying to be on their pilot group for doing vertical reporting for certified enrollment. And we kind of were bits and pieces, and then they kind of gave up on us because they were kind of afraid to break our production SIF environment. All their test beds were all just, they were just SIF testing. They weren't doing any real production stuff. So they were afraid to actually let us test and be in production at the same time. So that's that. And again, we just define all of our zones. The one thing you need to do on your zones is just make sure you got them scoped to the correct year. So every year we just go in and change these to the next current year. Life is good. And that's pretty much everything that's in Infinite Campus that you really need to be concerned about. I never look at the error log. The only thing that I ever do check, I think, is on the Agents tab when there is a problem. And I come in here, and then this will either be red or green. Green is good, red is bad. And if it's red, then this queue number is like it's some astronomical number of messages queued up that need to be spit back out. Because if it's red, it's stopped, and then this number starts accumulating, and then you know you have messages in the SIF system that aren't getting out to the other systems. So that's the Infinite Campus setup. It's pretty straightforward. When we started with Infinite Campus, SIF was not enabled by default, so we had to put in a support ticket to get that turned on. There's no way in here to do that. It's some text document on the back end that you can't get to. So they do that, and then Willie Fox up there is their SIF expert at Infinite Campus, and they kind of help you get started on what you need to do. So I've given all kinds of screenshots away to those districts who, hey, they've turned it on for us. How do we get this configured? So I take some screenshots of everything, and once you have the screenshots, you know which boxes you need to check. It's pretty easy to duplicate. So if you get going on something like this and need a guide or need to see which check boxes to start with, just let me know, and I'll be happy to send you those screenshots. So I think that's pretty much Infinite Campus. So I'm going to remote into our system. Here is our SIFWorks Directory Manager, and this is our Active Directory agent. So there's nothing sexy in SIF. It just works. There's no prettiness. There's no bells and whistles. The only prettiness is I'm not re-entering all this data 17 different times. It's an automated process, but there's no glitz. There's no bling. There's no nothing. So it's kind of non-exciting. Here's our agent setup for Active Directory. You point it at your nearest domain controller. What do you want your directory template to be set up like? So here, this is our district container for our schools. You run this template wizard, and it walks you through. We have our Active Directory set up by, at the root, or under the root, we have an OU called students, and then under that, we do graduation years. We used to break them up into different schools. We have 5 elementaries. We had two middle schools. Now we just have 1 middle school and 1 high school. When we went to Google, all this kind of configuration piece changed. So we actually went back in and got rid of our buildings and just went to grad year. It cleaned up the way we had to manage users, and then the way it was syncing with Google. So we actually did away with the school stuff. We weren't doing a lot with groups and messaging and email that way anyway with students, so it wasn't that big of a problem for us. We didn't really know what we were missing. So we went through and changed that, and then there's just a nice little tool to decide how you're going to do this. So these are just fields that you pick. How do you want your full name? And then you go in and you pick which object that you want for your full name. And if you want to be first name, last name, fine. If you want to be last name, first name, that's fine too. If you want to be any kind of whatever you want to be, this tool is really convenient and flexible on how you want to do that. So how do we build our user accounts? Well, that's another field. So it'll go through here, and I want the field first name. I want all lowercase, and then I want the first character of the first name. Then next, I want the last name all in lowercase, and I want the first 17 characters. The reason we picked 17 characters was there used to be, I don't know if there still exists, but there used to be a limit on how long the username could be in Active Directory. So that's where we picked that. And then we removed somewhere one of these fields, or maybe it just did that all by itself, but it took out all the hyphens or apostrophes and all that stuff. So it's just all characters. It converts it all to lowercase, and then it plunks in the last two characters of the graduation year. So all of our kids are, like my oldest is C. Pearson 19, so Cole Pearson from 2019. So that's how his username is created. It's all done on the fly. The next C. Pearson 19 that shows up, he becomes C. Pearson 191, and so on and so forth as their duplicates. And that's pretty much it. We set a default password. We actually go through there and change that after the fact. So by doing it this way, because of the way that the Active Directory sync is, this account wouldn't be created in Active Directory, so it would just dump the password going into Google. So that's why we do the password after the fact later on. So that's how that is. And you can use this. I think that's pretty much it in this side. We do actually plunk some other data in here. So we published the school name. We published their student ID at Infinite Campus should we ever need to do that. What login script we want to use, how that all breaks out. So the tool is pretty flexible on what data you can actually dump into Infinite Campus. It's really handy. And again, once this thing is all set up, you don't really touch it. We really never go in and make any changes to this. So it's one of those set it and forget it kind of things. So I'm going to get out of that piece. If you were doing staff, you run through the same wizard for the staff side and exactly what you do. So your staff and students can have totally different settings if you want to do that. What else is in here that I need to show you? I think the only thing that's ever in here is is it this one? Nope. You can see how often that I actually have to get in here to do this. I don't remember where the stuff is at. There's somewhere in here where you can actually look at any messages that are being held up. So if data is not being passed back and forth, usually what you have to do, starting and stopping the agent, sometimes they just freeze up. Very rarely do they do that, but sometimes that happens. So start and stop will actually clean that up and do that. So that works out well. Somewhere in here you can actually see the messages that are in the queue. I can't find that right now. And then we have notifications set up, so anytime there's an Active Directory account created or disabled or re-enabled, we get an email address saying what happens there. So that way we just get some kind of notification, one, to make sure that the agent is still running. So if we don't ever get any messages on it, there never is a day when we don't see anything except on a Saturday and Sunday. So even if we don't enroll any new kids, somebody's always moved out, somebody's always done an address change or a phone number change, and that will generate events to go back in. So we always see data going in and out of the Active Directory agent, even if it has really no bearing on Active Directory itself. I think that is pretty much it for Active Directory. And so, like I said, it's nothing sexy, it's nothing glamorous, but we're happy that we have it. I'll show you. Can I show you? Then our emails look like this. So here's a message from 1034. We reactivated William Irwin, grade 7. Here's his username, and he's in the OU of students, and then here's his Active Directory username. So that's what we get. It's just a kind of a checks and balances thing to show that the system is still working. I don't know if I have any ads, but it just says active or created. Here's a create. So account created, Kennedy McGuire, grade 6. Here's your username. Here's your email address, and that's pretty much it. Okay, so that's our AD agent. Here's the VersaTrans agent. It works a little different. It's set up a little different. Here's your same zone setup information, your connection information to your VersaTrans database, what version of CIF, what CIF spec do you want to run, your agent options, what data you want to pass back and forth, and then what IDs do you want to to match against. So we use local ID, which is our local student ID. You can use the state ID, and then all these other numbers are some kind of CIF spec field that is published by Student Information Systems. Excuse me. So phone number is the same type, so some of these are home numbers, some of these are work numbers. If you wanted to have the work number, that's just a different code. You need to figure out which code that is. Mailing address type and home address type, so these codes are PO boxes or mailing address or address 1, address 2 kinds of things. You need to make sure that you just have those configured. Again, once it's set up, you're never in here to touch this. And the confirm changes and then logging. So under confirm changes, we have all these checked. That's so the people out to transportation can actually see these messages before they actually just get dumped into Versatrans. So if you didn't want to actually ever look at any messages and didn't want to double check any of this stuff, you would uncheck all these boxes, hit save, and then it would just automatically get dumped to Versatrans without anybody overlooking it or checking it. Transportation is very picky. I don't know if anybody else's transportation departments are very picky, but ours are very anal and very picky. So they want to see every message coming in and out before it touches their data. And you know, they live and die by that address. They want to make sure it's correct, so I can kind of agree with that. So that's why we see that. We have some parsing lines. So if the agency's apartment, building, unit, number, or lot, then it knows to plunk that over into it's another field or another box in Versatrans, where in Infinite Campus it's just one long string. So that kind of helps them as well. You have to set up your grade mapping, so your CIF grade corresponds to this Versatrans RP grade, and then backwards if you're sending data the other way. So we're not, so you just tie these up, you match these up to what it means. So PK, or as you can see, kindergarten for us is always 3 different options. You know, there's a state code, there's another code, and then there's whatever the uncode is. So that's my student information gal's problem. I don't need to know what that is. So that's how that works. The synchronization piece we run once a year when we do a rollover and start a new school year, so we have to do that as well. You can go through here and match schools. You have to do the same with your school buildings that you have to do with grades. Your matched students, so once you've run that automated sync process, then there's always kids on the unmatched CIF side with the unmatched RP side. The reason, most of the time for us, that's the busing, the unmatched Versatrans students are the people going to our parochial schools or any of our church schools that we have to provide busing for because it's a state law. So that's what most of these kids over here are, St. Ed's and our community Christians kids and those kids that go to parochial schools. Our unmatched CIF students, a lot of times those are unenrolled or those are brand new kids that they didn't have to match against. So when we have all of our new kindergartners or all of our new preschoolers in the summertime, then the left-hand list, the unmatched CIF list, is longer, and you just manually add those from here. But so you just kind of double check these, and there's an easy way to go about that. But if for some reason they're both in the same list, that just means that they're not tied together, and you can tie them together, and all those changes happen automatically. So, and then if for some reason that you have 2 C. Pearson 19s or 2 Cole Pearsons and the wrong ones are tied together, then that's what you would go through and do an unmatch. And so you can break that CIF connection and then reconnect them to the right person. So sometimes automatic is not always smooth and easy. So transportation objects are just the stuff coming in and out. And your activity log is, these are just all messages going in and out of the system. So some troubleshooting stuff. Every once in a while you'll have a message that gets hung, or you'll have a phone number that won't get added, or you'll have a parent or emergency contact that's not in there. You can use these to kind of track down why and hopefully figure out what the story is. And that's pretty much everything in Versatrans. What it looks like from the Versatrans side and from the transportation piece. So this is their dashboard, and then they have just this CIF unconfirmed messages. You come in here, and then here's their 5 CIF messages that they haven't dealt with today. So this is as you can see from the top, add new student. It plunks in all this data. What do you want to do with it? The next one is an add, so the same idea, add. Here's a change student. So let's see if I can figure out what's changed. Okay. It does a nice job in here because everything that's been changed is bolded, so they can just kind of quickly glance through here and say, oh, their school has changed, why? So then you can kind of come in here, and they were at the middle school, they've exited the middle school and are now enrolled back in the middle school. So they must have left and then came back. So whether that was a placement kind of thing or something like that, but that's why that's been changed. But so if they like this or it's going to work for them, they hit accept, it dumps them into VersaTrans itself, and then they can put them on a bus right from that screen. I'm going to exit without accepting so I don't break anything. I don't want to do a backup. And I think that's the everything on the VersaTrans agent to show. And that's pretty much all I can show on SIF. I don't have access to our library system because the AEA or the consortium holds all that stuff. So they do all the modifications. They told me what objects to provide to them, and they set all that stuff up on the back end. So I don't have anything to do with the library piece. It just works. That's what I know. And that's pretty much SIF for us in Fort Dodge. Any SIF questions that I can answer? All right. The Google Apps password sync, there's nothing to show on that one. There's a little shim that you put on all your domain controllers and it just runs. There's nothing to see. So it's really easy once it's... You have to make sure you put it on all your domain controllers, because all it does is sit there and looks for password changes, and you never can tell which domain control gets your passwords. So that's why you have to load it on all of them. Once you have that installed on all of them, and when we installed it, there was a reboot, so you kind of have to schedule that accordingly. But I don't know if that's changed, but there was a reboot to start with when we did that. But once it's on there, any password change that you've done, by the time you go to Google and try to log in, that password's already been there and updated. The cool part about the Google Apps password sync, it removes the Google password requirements. So you can go through and you can have a 2-character password if you want. So that works well for your K2 users. If you just want to, ABC 123 or however you want to go about that, you can do that with the Google Apps password sync. You can do that with GADS as well. Yeah, GAM. You can do that with GAM too. They bypass the password requirements as well, so you can do that there too. But then the beauty part about it, if somebody calls up for a password change, we plunk in an Active Directory and it flows to Google. The other thing the other Google part is, which machine am I on? Is GADS, Google Active Directory Sync. My apologies for not having these signed in. Okay, there's not a lot of stuff that goes with GADS either. You basically come in and just, all it does is there's a GUI front end to build this XML file to pass data back and forth. And I thought I launched that. There it goes. So I'll pull up our current config. So you tell what you want to sync. So we're only using for OUs and user accounts. We're not doing profiles and groups and shared contacts and calendar resources. So we're hardly harnessing everything you can do with this. You go through and you tell it your domain, and you got to authorize it. There's a process you walk through if you have any proxy settings and anything you want to exclude. So here's where we have, I did a session yesterday on our Google tablets. So all of our Google tablets, we just create generic accounts in Google. They don't exist in our Active Directory piece. So I tell GADS to ignore that OU on the Google side, because if you didn't, it would disable all those accounts. So it didn't see an Active Directory user that's correlated with that one up in Google, so then it would disable those thinking it's not needed, so shut those off. So you go through and you turn off all the you write some exclusions on the pieces you want to ignore on the Google side. And then you do the same thing for the stuff you want to do. You don't do the same thing on the AD side, you only tell it where you want to look at on the AD side. So in your org units, you actually go through, no, it must be user accounts. In your search rules, you tell it to look in all these org units in your AD structure, and then that's where it finds all the users to plunk up to Google. So you just, every year we have to add one for all the incoming kindergartners, and then they're just created and they're done. So that's what we have to do for that. Those are the only few pieces that we have turned on. There's a way to sync and test and make sure it's going to work and not blow things up, so I would recommend doing that. Otherwise you disable all your accounts, and then you have to go in and fix what you screwed up so you can re-enable all those accounts real fast. So it works well. And then all this does is it writes this XML file, and then you create a scheduled task and task scheduler to run however often you want to do that. So we have it run at 1 o'clock in the morning. You can have it run every hour on the hour, however you want to do that, and then we get an email back saying, okay, here's what the GADs ran for you and how well that it worked. Let's see, I got to remember where those are at. I don't file those. Oh, that's Google something down. But there's an email that comes through and it gives you a summary of what it did. We created so many users, we modified so many users, we disabled so many users. And then you actually get a list of what you did or what it did. So it added these 17 new users. Here's the keys and the addresses it gave them, things like that. So that's a great product. It works. Once you get it configured, it just works. Except for last night, every once in a while you'll get a Java exception, and then you run it manually and it works fine. So every 10th time or something, we have to run it manually, or you wait till the next night and then it runs fine. Nothing's changed. It's just some weird Java thing that they're well aware of. But it's not usually that big of a deal. So, anything on the two Google pieces that we use? All right. Let me see if I can remember my Clever sign in. We use Clever for one piece of software. We looked at it for another piece of software. I think I'm a district admin. So Clever is this handy piece of software. We heard about it through, if anybody's using Hapara and Teacher Desktop, this is a way you can automate all that data to be created in Hapara. What we didn't know is that, trying to get some automation and stuff happening with Infinite Campus and going deeper in besides using SIF, they were actually, you just give them a username into Infinite Campus and you give them read-only access, and somehow it goes in through there and it just sucks all that data in by running ad hocs and doing weird things like that. I don't know, it's pretty amazing what they can do, but they can actually get section data, teacher data, and then populate sections and stuff. So we started out using Clever for Dreambox, and I'm going to see if I can show you how that's set up. So you go in through here and you pick what apps you want to use, and then you just pick your sections that you need to have dumped into this other system. And it's just this web, there's nothing hosted. We don't have anything on our end. It just logs into our Infinite Campus system. Dreambox is a hosted app that's hosted, whoever hosts that. So Clever goes in, gets all that data, and then translates that to whatever it needs, and then goes in and then plunks that into Clever. And we've used that for Dreambox. We're on our second year with Dreambox, and that it just works. It gets updates, it disables accounts, it does whatever it needs to do. It's just kind of one of those handy pieces. So that's something we looked at doing more with. So we just picked up Lexia. Come on, mouse. We just picked up Lexia this last summer. And so we were looking to use Clever to populate our Lexia databases and stuff. The only downside was we didn't have any customization with that. So the only thing that Lexia could do for passwords was they wanted to do a first name dot last name. And when we're talking Lexia is a K2 app, how we use that, I wasn't going to have a kindergartner try to, figure out how to type their entire first name dot for last name. If I'm going to have them remember a username, I'm going to have them remember the username that they're going to have for their entire school experience. But there was no customizing the Clever piece to go in and create that. So if we wanted Clever to do that, we would have needed to create a custom field in Infinite Campus and then somehow populated that to make that work, and we didn't get that far. So it's on my list of things to do, but it's not happening yet. So we still do a manual data export, we do a manual data import, for Clever, or for Lexia to make that work. But Clever is definitely a solution you'll want to look at when you go to the overview, or the dashboard, I'm sorry. These are the apps that we have turned on, but here's all the apps that they use. SimCity, there's Spelling City, there's Khan Academy, Google Apps is in here. So they do tie all kinds of systems together. And from what Clever has told me is Clever never charges the schools to make this work. It's the applications, if they need to charge, like there was a $1,000 setup for Hapara or something like that to automate that piece. But it's the vendor of the app that's being populated is where there's money that could be exchanged. So with Hapara there was a cost. With Lexia and Dreambox there wasn't any cost involved in getting those two systems to tie together. So that's just something you'll have to consider on an individual system basis. So I'm sorry I don't know a lot more about that. But once it's set up, again, once it's set up, there's never a lot of things. It just kind of runs and it's all good. So it's worked well for Dreambox. It didn't work so well for Lexia for us, but that was because we were being picky about the way we wanted our usernames and stuff formatted. So that's really life in Fort Dodge for how we deal with accounts and keeping them in sync across as many systems as we can. Any questions that anybody has or that I can try to answer? All right, well, if you have any along the way or need to get in touch with me, I'm pretty easy to find. Just find me at Fort Dodge, and I'll be glad to help out in whatever way I can. So, otherwise, enjoy your last couple sessions and travel home safe today.